ironing women can feel empowered to make confident decisions and live the life they truly deserve. Now, if you've been riding with us for a while, you know I love connecting music and the topic we're going to discuss today. And we've been listening to the musical diva, Ava Max. And the song we were just listening to was Kings and Queens. How many of you are actually familiar with her? I actually thought this song was so fitting for our guest, who I saw you jamming over there, Louise. I thought this was so fitting because the song Ava Max is all about celebrating women who are out there living the life that they want. And really they're like potentially blazing a trail that they didn't maybe plan to. And what she's saying in the song is she wants to celebrate the men who are elevating the women in their lives and letting the women, basically she's calling them the queens out there, which I love, the queen. And she's basically saying that they should feel like they're not in this fight alone, that they're not dancing on their own. I thought that was actually a cool line. And that they have a community and that they can also be resilient. And I just thought her message resonated so much because I love to use this platform to spotlight powerful women and tell their stories and the lessons that they've learned on their journey, whether it's to wealth, to leadership, or just to purpose. And so I love that she was talking about celebrating these women, celebrating the men who celebrate the women. And today's guest is actually no exception. She's someone whose presence in the Canadian financial landscape has made such a lasting impact. And I'm so honored to be speaking with you, Louise Montague. She's actually an independent director. She's been a trailblazer, mentor, and a woman who's just spent decades carving out a space in a male-dominated industry, long before diversity was a boardroom priority, really. And she paved the way for people like myself. So I'm super excited to have her here. Louise has not only built a remarkable career, but she's also built a life rich with insight, resilience, and perspective. And today, we're really lucky she shared all of that with us. Louise, welcome to the show, and thanks for jamming with me.
Oh, thanks, Jackie. I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's such a pleasure.
A great start with the music. I love to walk along with it. It was great.
Yes, I know. You're not dancing on your own, right?
That's right. That's right.
We have community, and we have to be in community to sometimes feel the strength of that. And
Yeah.
you know all about that because, you know, for those of you who might not know you personally, maybe a really good place to start is just telling a little bit about your journey and how you actually even found your way into the world of finance. I know for me it was by accident. So what's your story?
Well, mine was by accident too, actually. I had just graduated from university, felt like the world owed me a whole lot because I was just so smart and so clever, and I was not going to have any trouble finding a job. And when I started pounding the pavement, I found, oh, well, this is a little different, and I was having trouble finding a job. And I just by pure happenstance decided to walk into a local Royal Bank around the corner from my house. And I went in to talk to them and said, do you have any job openings? And well, no, they had just filled the job and nothing. So, but a week later they called me, and my very first job was a teller. And, it wasn't anything I ever dreamed about. I wasn't terribly interested in it.
Right.
But man, did it open doors for me, and it got me started in the financial industry.
Well, we all have to start somewhere. I started selling mortgages on the phone many years ago.
Yeah.
Where you start isn't where you end up, right?
Yeah.
So that's awesome. So you started there. What was it like actually in those early days of finance? I can't even imagine.
Well, I went off after, being a teller. I took some time off to have my family and got back into the financial industry a little bit later on. But in those days, of course, it was really male dominated. Women, very few to no senior women executives. No pay equity, very little diversity, very combative, competitive environment. It was kind of a dog-eat-dog culture when I was in the executive level of banking. So it was not for the faint of heart some days.
Yeah, I mean, I came in the early 2000s and it was not for the faint of heart. So I can only imagine what you would have seen and experienced.
Yeah. Oh,
How did you overcome all that? But feel free, it sounded like you had something else to add about
no,
that.
no, no, no. How did I overcome it? Well, I learned, first of all, I learned what not to do from my worst bosses. And I was very fortunate to have two great mentors, both men who were really pushed me beyond where I thought I was capable of even doing. And they taught me what good leadership looks like. In fact, one female senior executive told me that the only way I was going to advance in the industry was to play the men's game the way the men played it. Be aggressive and elbows up and be very competitive. And it took me a long time actually to kind of believe in myself and kind of do it my way and be focused on people, on trying to inspire others to be the best that they could be and empower people. And recognize good practices and be a role model, try to be a role model and walk the walk.
It's so interesting to me because you're saying that you took your best lessons of what not to do for men, but you also had some of your best cheerleaders and best examples of leadership from men as well.
Mhm.
So, and strangely enough, what I'm hearing is that some women were not necessarily giving you the best advice.
Well, in the early days, I'm not sure. There were very few women at the senior levels, and I'm not sure any of us knew how to play the game in corporate life and in a very aggressive environment. So, everybody finds their own way, and everybody has their own methodologies. But certainly, I had some good mentors along the way in men, and later on with women too. But you know,
Well, it's interesting because as well, even now there's not that many women. There's more, and
mhm.
thankfully we're seeing a little bit more of a community being built, but there still isn't very many, and so it's great that even in that environment where you didn't necessarily see too many examples of female leadership and what you could do, you kind of came up with your own blueprint. I'd love to know what your biggest lesson is from experiencing all these challenges in the early days and even potentially as time went on.
Well, I think maybe two things stand out for me. I had one of my bosses in the early days was he was frankly a bully and really mistreated his team. He was equal among men and women in the abuse that
Oh, great.
he threw at people. And for a long time, I kind of played the victim like everybody else on the team. And it wasn't until, finally I kind of had it one day and I thought, no, I got to stand up to this bully. And so that was a huge lesson for me in terms of, first of all, you got to call out the bad behavior. You got to do it right away. But you also have to be an influencer in changing the culture in terms of what kind of a culture you want to be working in, and whether it's with your own team or within the organization. But you can be a positive influencer when you stand up for the right values. And I guess the other lesson maybe was that I also in those days bought into the myth that women had to work twice as hard as the men to get ahead. And I believe finally, I kind of clued into that and thought, no, you just got to work smarter, not longer. And so that really shaped how I approached.
That's a really important lesson that maybe some of us still don't know.
It's tough because you feel like you got to race all the time to keep up, and you got to work extra hours and put in long hours, and being a workaholic is no badge of honor. So you just got to work smart.
What does that look like, Louise? Because I think there's so many high earning women out there who do think that you have to work twice as hard, twice as long, and all of those things. What
Yeah,
does working
yeah.
smarter look like if you've
Well,
never experienced that?
Yeah, well, being organized, first of all,
Mhm.
for me anyway, was being really organized. So having, having a really good game plan for the day or the week, planning ahead and making sure that I had some goals for the day or the week that I wanted to accomplish. And that was the boundary. Once I reached those things, then I could, kind of relax a little bit. But also setting boundaries around the length of time you're going to work. You know, uh, Lots of times I was racing home to try and take my kids to ballet
Right.
lessons or soccer games or whatever it was, and I was late, always running late because I hadn't left the office in time, and because I hadn't set boundaries for myself in those early days. So I think being organized is really key.
So being organized, and when you say setting boundaries, is it also setting boundaries with those leaders that you report to so that they know these are my
Oh, you have to be vocal about. You've got to tell people what your boundaries are. I think if you're a mom with young kids at home and you've got to be somewhere to be with your family. Everybody else needs to know that. So yeah, it's about and putting some restrictions around what's workable for you and your family, and letting your boss know that up front all helps.
And what about, because you were talking about not working twice as hard and twice as long and creating the balance for you with boundaries, how do you advocate for yourself to say, even though I didn't work as long, I've done X, Y, Z to create value? How do you navigate that?
Well, again, it's about having the goals for your day or your week, and being organized. So if you've accomplished the things, do the hard things first.
Right.
Do the easy things later on, but do the hard things. Get them out of the way during the day or the week, and not beat up on yourself. And you can't. You got to be kind to yourself along the way, and so if you didn't get everything done, or you need to leave even earlier or whatever, you have to look after yourself, and you've got to put your priorities. Have to be in line.
And I say this as well. And I think being organized and setting your priorities are so crucial, such crucial lessons for women. I think what I was trying to get at was around promoting that to people who you report to so that they know I might leave at 5, but I've done XYZ in the day. So, because sometimes I find women aren't always the best at promoting themselves and saying like their contribution and putting it out there so people know what they've been doing behind the scenes.
And
Do you see that as
we're not.
well? Do you
Oh,
experience that?
absolutely, absolutely. And I well, in I don't know, not everybody's a good cheerleader for themselves, and you
Yeah,
have to be.
very true.
You have to let people know what you've accomplished, what you're doing, what you've accomplished, and be vocal about it, and not be shy about it.
And that was what I was going to ask, is any advice for people who aren't necessarily the best in promoting it? It's really, it sounds like being vocal and making sure that that information of what you've done, what you've accomplished, those goals that you set that you've
Hmm.
accomplished, that you're putting that in front of the people that need to know.
Hmm. You know, I used to like working between Christmas and New Year's, and one of the reasons that I liked to do it was because it was a good time to reflect on all the things that I had accomplished during the year,
Mm,
and I quickly learned that you need the days go by so quickly. You need to kind of keep a running tab of what you've accomplished during the year, and I always had that little sheet beside me, to say, I can check things off the list, and I've accomplished these things, but you do have to tell people about it.
I love that actually, Louise, that having like your little celebrate myself book of all
Hmm.
the accomplishments. Because I think it's so easy, as you said, life goes so fast. I can't believe we're sitting here and it's almost the end of the year already. It
I
goes
know.
quick. And I think in the course of any given day, week, month, it's quick. It's very easy to forget your wins and forget all the accomplishments you've had and minimize them. So having that book that says, your accomplishment book that says, here, these are all the things I can point to. So if I have a meeting with my leader or my boss or whatever, I can look back and reflect on it. Even as a business owner, I think it's important to kind of just, I do that all the time. We celebrate wins every week in my team, just because the week goes by so quickly, it's easy to forget all the things you did.
Absolutely, you do. Yeah.
So I'd love to also fast forward to today now and just talk a little bit more how your life and career has evolved in such amazing ways. Like, you've stepped into a new chapter, and I think so many women in our audience are curious about that after phase when you've quote unquote retired after being a high achiever. Let's talk a little bit about where you are now.
Well, where I am now is kind of celebrating the good life. To be very honest with you, I feel like retirement is a gift. It's a privilege, and it allows me to spend my time the way I want to spend it, and being able to make a contribution to community. I never have enough time to read a book, so retired people are busy people.
That's what I keep hearing.
Yeah, you want to have a sense of purpose during the day, and I get up every day to kind of knowing what I need to accomplish every day. So, I just feel it's important to keep your mind busy and continue. I continue to want to make a contribution in some way. So I do a lot of volunteer work, and I have some board work that I do, and I keep, I have things that I, like everybody else, use how to find joy and spend the times doing the things that bring you joy. I like to sing. I used to be in a choir. I love to swim. So I have the time now to do those kinds of things. So it's a real gift.
Well, it sounds like you're really taking advantage of the gift and doing all the hobbies and finding ways to fill your life with the things that you really want to do. And I know that many people, I certainly, when I came into this industry, heard phrases like Freedom 55, and maybe they imagined, because of that, I imagined a specific kind of retirement, which I think is changing. What did you originally think the stage of your life would look like?
Well, I thought that, I guess I did think I was going to read more books. And I guess, and I actually thought that my husband and I would travel more than we have been, and COVID had a change in that.
Oh,
but
no kidding.
I also found, I've been spending a lot of time very focused on the environment and climate. I'm part of a group that is a climate advocacy group, and so, since I've been more environmentally conscious, I try to limit our air travel. So our travel has changed. We have a lot of great car trips now. We get to spend lots of time with our grandkids. So I feel very blessed that way. But I did think that I would, I guess I didn't realize I was going to be as busy as I am, to be honest with you. But it's good busy, it's all positive, and that's the beauty of it, is you get to spend your time the way you want to.
Yeah, well, it sounds like your the time that you're talking about, you've been using it as a gift, as I mentioned, and you're filling your time, not spending your time. Like, it's you've made these time investments now that you, after spending your time potentially however many years you've worked, now you're very, very intentional, it sounds like. I was going to say, but now that you're living this chapter in your life, what do you think has surprised you the most about this chapter?
Well, what surprised me? I guess maybe it's easier for women. Maybe I don't know this to be true.
Right.
My sense is that retirement is easier for women than men, because perhaps we don't link our identity so much to our careers. But when I was working, I kind of felt like retirement I deserved it, and there were things that all these things I was going to do. Things fall into your lap sometimes, and not necessarily going looking for things that just pure happenstance. So surprised me things that surprised me, like uh, some volunteer jobs that I just didn't think I'd ever be involved with, and I love to cook, so I happened into a conversation with a woman who was organizing cooking lessons for people who use the food bank, and so it's just a pure gift to be able to do those kinds of things that I never dreamed I'd ever do. So lots of lovely little surprises along the way.
Yeah, and it sounds like you really are tapping into, all the things that, bring your life joy. You talked about contributing to organizations, volunteering, and that seems to be giving you a lot of joy. And I wonder what gives you the most joy? What have you enjoyed the most in this
Well,
period of your
we
life?
we started talking about listening to the music. We started talking about the importance of community, and to me, it's all about community. It's a community in my neighborhood. It's community in my volunteer work. It's community with friends. It's the social aspect of being with one another and lifting people up, bringing people along, helping people along the way, no matter anything that you can do to help someone during a day. It's that sense of community that's really important for me particularly.
I actually think you're not alone in that, Louise, because I think one of the things we don't actually contemplate when we're working is how much community we might have at work that disappears when we retire. And it would be like the day to day, right? Like you go into the office and there's people around you, and it's kind of like your work community. They're there all the
Mhm.
time. And then all of a sudden you retire and they're not there anymore. So,
Mhm.
and it sounds like you've built that community.
And you have to build it. Sometimes you have to go looking for it. Sometimes you have to just put yourself out there. And other times things fall into your lap, as I said. But it's a bit of a culture shock going cold turkey. Just retiring one day and not having, particularly if you don't have a game plan. And I didn't really
Right.
have a strong game plan of what I was going to do in retirement. It took me a while to kind of find my feet. You kind of feel like you're on vacation for a while, and
Exactly.
then when the vacation is over, you say, "Well, now what?" And how am I going to fill my days? And I was very purposeful about that in many ways.
I think that's actually noted for people who are about to embark on that journey themselves. Just what you were mentioning, being intentional about what your retirement's going to look like, having that game plan, and making sure that you cultivate a community. I think those are really important takeaways for people who are probably enamored with the idea of retirement, but they don't necessarily know that after the vacation, as you said, now what? So,
Now, and some people are bored. They have a difficult time filling the day. Whereas if you try to build a new community around yourself, you're going to find yourself very quickly engaged with other people and being able to, find happiness and purpose.
yeah,
Yeah.
very, very crucial purpose.
Mm.
So now let's talk a little bit about what your legacy. Now that you're in this time where you're enjoying your time and you're being very intentional about your time, what's next? What do you want your legacy to be?
I some people dwell on this a lot and have a game plan. I guess I'm not one of those people, but since I've become more environmentally conscious, I'm really on a journey. It's a kind of a new journey, but to try and live more sustainably, and I'm very interested in helping others try to do that. And it means something different to everyone, but I feel like the planet is sick, and its health is really declining rapidly. So I want to help leave a healthier planet for my grandkids, and if I can be instrumental somehow in shaping that, then that will make me feel a little bit better and less guilty, perhaps. Beyond that, I think I just want my gravestone to say, I was kind in life to people.
That's actually a really beautiful legacy. If you're trying to make the world a better place for your grandchildren, then they'll already say grandma was kind. I think that's a given, especially if you're a good cook. I think that already sets a fire in many of child's hearts. So don't worry. I think your legacy is well protected.
I said I like to cook. I didn't say I was a good cook.
I'll have to ask some of those grandchildren. I happen to know them. We'll see what they say. I'll ask off the cuff. Don't worry, Louise.
Okay.
The secret. I'll get to the bottom of this for you.
Okay.
So now let's talk a little bit about women who might be not someone who entered the financial industry like you and I have. They might be just a woman who didn't learn about money in school. And as a result of that, maybe they never had a money conversation with themselves. So some of the women who are listening into this show struggle with financial confidence. It's just something that they don't feel very successful around, even if they're high achieving in every other aspect of their life. It's just not someplace they feel comfortable. So I'd love to know, what type of advice would you offer to women who may be challenged in dealing with their finances?
First of all, what comes to mind is that I don't know what it's like today, and I talk to my granddaughters about this, but financial literacy was not in the curriculum during education. It still isn't, sadly. So some of us have to learn the hard way about how to look after ourselves and manage our finances. At one point in my career, I was a single mom with 2 young kids with very little financial support. And that changed how I viewed things. And I, vowed then to never be dependent on anyone else for my financial health. And I had to look after me. And look after my future that way. So I'd say to anyone who, is kind of wondering how they can improve their finances or look after their finances. When I was in the business, we used to tell people, the first maxim was to pay yourself first. And that means saving and be diligent about putting aside money for every paycheck, save something for the future, and do it automatically so that it doesn't hurt, or you don't find other ways to spend the money. Track what you spend. I use a software package called Quicken, and I track all my expenses, and the money fritters away really quickly and really easily if you don't.
So easy.
And
especially these days.
Yeah, you don't realize, how much you're spending on coffee, every day or every week, or what you're spending on groceries. So track what you spend. My other advice that I didn't take in the early days
Okay.
was, you got to really try and curb your consumerism and not feel getting caught up in the trap of keeping up with the Joneses. Material things are only that, and you can spend all your savings frittering away on things just to keep up with everybody else and appearances, and don't get caught in that trap would be my advice.
That's great advice.
And engage a independent financial planner who will help you set your goals, and it's particularly if you're not you don't feel like you're financially savvy. Everybody needs a game plan, and so a financial planner can help you with a game plan. That would be my advice.
Great takeaways. Those are fantastic takeaways. And before we wrap up, I have a few more questions. One of my final questions is, what does money mean to you at this stage of life? Because you were talking about not getting caught up in consumerism, and something flashed in my mind around, you get to the stage where you accumulate a bunch of things, and then you get to this other stage of your life, and you might be there where you're like trying to get rid of things.
Yeah.
And it all had cost you money. Sometimes people are you're paying someone to help you get rid of things, right?
It always it and I'm not being critical. Everybody's got their own thing that they have to do, but I drive by and I look at all of these storage units filled with
Right.
filled with things, and I think, where we get caught up. We live on autoplay a lot of times. We're just busy particularly when you're in the midst of your career and you've got a young family. You just go, 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 and you're on autopilot, and you don't think about it. And do we, as you say, I'm at that stage now in my life where I've kind of, I'm trying to get rid of things, not accumulate things,
Right.
so yeah, it's but we got to be conscious of our consumers, and that's the environmental side of me coming out, I guess. But um, you know, money to me these days means that I'm very lucky, and I can live comfortably. I'm still very careful with my money. My financial planner always told me that he was worried that I didn't spend enough money.
I
But it
have those
means,
conversations regularly.
do you? Yeah. But it means being able to help my kids and my grandkids. And I believe that with privilege comes maybe a moral obligation to help others. And so I really try to, particularly this time of year, there's so many people who are struggling and who are less fortunate. And I feel deep gratitude for what I have. So trying to help others, and increasing my charitable donations every year, those kinds of things. But mostly I'm just very, very grateful for what I have, and the fact that I'm able to help sometimes help other people.
Yeah, and it sounds like you're at that stage of life where, making an impact with your money too, not just with your legacy, is important to you. So I think that's a amazing purpose to have
Mm, mm.
around your money. So that's great. Good for you. That's a fantastic message even for the people listening. So now we're actually at the end of the formal part of our podcast, and we're going to usually do a couple of signature firing round questions, and it's just really quick answers. So don't worry, you don't have to think very hard, just whatever comes to your mind. But it's signature for our show to end with a couple of firing round questions. So just let me know. Are you ready?
Go for it.
Okay, fantastic. So, one piece of advice you would give to your younger self.
Be true to yourself. Be true to your values. Don't take on others' values. Just live your life by your own values.
And what brings you?
Sorry, I missed that.
Oh, be true to your own values. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, yeah.
Fantastic. Okay, a book or mentor that shaped your career.
A book or a mentor?
Yeah,
Did you
either.
miss
Like,
it?
was it a
Well,
book or a mentor, even a lesson that shaped you?
I'm a mentor, and that was an into a boss who really pushed me way before I thought I was capable of doing the things that he pushed me to do. And he had faith in me, and I didn't have faith in myself. But what it taught me was, I could do things, but more importantly, it was, how to help others grow. And people need people need confidence, and they need to be pushed a little bit sometimes in their careers, and people rise to the occasion always.
That's actually a really good point that I think we all of us could learn from.
Mm.
Final question is, what's one thing you wish women talked about more often when it comes to money?
When it comes to money,
Hmm.
I think saving and planning for the future. We don't talk about that. We talk about how much we spend. We talk about how much things cost. We talk about the cost of living, and but we don't talk about that we have a goal of saving and looking after ourselves and investing for our futures and our families, it's I maybe you do, but I mean your business, but I don't hear those conversations.
Well, more importantly, and that's actually very crucial, right? That women who are, before they ever get there, they're talking about it and they're excited about it. So please, I
Mhm.
hope that for the women who are hearing this, that they get excited to talk about the future and they start saving and making plans for the future, that they are inspired by. Because this was an inspiring conversation for me, and it was quite grounding. Your story, your wisdom, and your honesty has really been a gift. I really thank you for sharing your journey with us today. And I'm sure our listeners are going to get a lot out of it. And for those of you who are listening, if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with another hiring woman in your life who might need a little bit of inspiration. Maybe they need a little bit of reassurance, and maybe they just need a reminder that their path, as Louise so eloquently said, is theirs to define, right? Like, as you said earlier, Louise, it's all about your own values, not other people's values.
Mhm.
So that's it for today's episode of the Hiring Women podcast. And if this conversation resonated, I'd love for you to stay connected. Follow our firm's LinkedIn page at Team Jackie Porter, because that's also where we share insights and resources and also some updates you won't want to miss. And if you'd like to keep listening to more episodes of this podcast, you can find us on all of your favorite audio platforms. And that includes Spotify, Deezer, Amazon Music, Player FM, and much, much more. Just search for the Hiring Women podcast and hit follow so you never miss a conversation. And to everyone listening, I hope Louise's journey inspires you to feel confident about taking up space in any room and to advocate for yourself when it comes to understanding your money. Who knows who might follow your lead? It may be your children or even someone who you don't even know who is watching. So until next time, keep building, keep earning, and keep living the life that you want. Be in touch soon, hiring community. And thank you again, Louise, for being here.
Thanks very much, Jackie.
Bye now.
Bye.